All right, so let's talk a little bit about Japan, and I know that the state of Washington funded the project, um, and for the export meat market in the United States. Tell me a little bit about that adventure and take us down that story.
Yeah, the state of Washington has money that comes into the university to help develop Pacific Rim markets on agricultural product, any kind of product. And the university called this an impact program, the International Marketing Program in Agricultural Technologies. And they realized that this country of Japan was going to take the tariffs and the quotas off of meat going into Japan in 1991. And so they put a team of us together to go to Japan and see if we could help the state of Washington market meat to Japan and outcompete the Midwest. The Midwest is considered the corn belt of America and has considered the best meat in the U.S. And so they Ray Gissom, who's a rural sociologist, Ray Wright, an animal scientist, and myself, an animal scientist, were sent to Japan in 1988, 89 to kind of evaluate the market and try to figure out how we could compete in it. And we had never even heard of Wagyu before then. We went all up and down through Japan for 11 days, visiting universities, small ranchers, AI facilities, and bull studs, and slaughter plants. And in the slaughter plants, as Charlie Gaskins explained, it was very impressive. We'd never seen meat like that. We'd never tasted meat like that. And so we came back with plan A was to try and to bring some of these genetics into the United States. And at that time, it was just a real good situation for us because at that time we had Tom Foley was a Speaker of the House in Washington, D.C., and he was out of Spokane and was a friend of Washington State University. And so when we brought this recommendation in, I never met Tom Foley. In fact, I didn't even vote for him, but he took our recommendation and somehow got it done, and that these cattle were allowed to come into the U.S. It's the only place in the world outside of Japan that the Wagyu cattle were allowed to come into. No place. So any of the cattle, Wagyu cattle, in any other place in the world, came through Washington first, or came through the United States first, and then were exported. So it was one of those situations. We were in the right place at the right time with the right people, got it done. So those cattle were brought in. The first ones came into Moses Lake. They were owned by Japanese that saw the advantage of trying to make money in this situation. And so that's how it got started. We were lucky to be close to it and had a faculty that was excited and interested in studying Wagyu cattle. But basically what we were doing was crossbreeding Wagyu bulls onto Angus cows, making this meat half-blood cattle, and shipping it back to Japan. And so at that time, Japan could only produce a third of the meat they needed. We had a third of the market, and Australia had a third of the market. And so most all of the Wagyu meat produced in the U.S. was being shipped off the West Coast to Japan, and then mad cow disease hit, and basically we couldn't ship out anymore. In fact, we had meat stuck on the ports and the docks and all over, and had to sell it back into the U.S. where people had not heard about Wagyu. They knew about Kobe, heard of that term, but not Wagyu, and had to sell it for less than it was regular meat was selling for, choice USDA choice meat. But within a year, the restaurants and the people buying this meat in the U.S. saw that it was a superior product, and it took about a year probably, and then the market was better in the U.S. than it had been in Japan. and then Wagyu took off again. And so it's just an interesting thing, something that I thought was going to ruin the market for us, mad cow disease. It did ruin the export market, but it made the domestic market better, and people learned about it. We had not advertised, people didn't believe in it, cattlemen didn't want to raise them, and that situation turned it around. And now the Wagyu breed is probably the fastest growing breed in the United States. And that was part of the reason right there.